what verse to use and when. So many times I see people declaring and decreeing when trying to overcome their spiritual oppression that's coming against them. And I get it. They want to do whatever they can to try to fight back. Unfortunately, though, much of this strategy is really the traditions of men, or it just may not be that effective. It's basically the shotgun method, or throwing spaghetti on the wall method and seeing what sticks. That may come down to someone asking, well, then should we use the prayers then that somebody else has written? Well, sure, there is a time and a place for that, but that shouldn't be the only tool in the tool belt. Now, don't get me wrong. Sometimes, out of Yah's grace and mercy, those methods will work. You may have seen this before with new believers. They will oftentimes get their prayers answered right away, as Yah wants to encourage them as they start in their new way of life. So I suggest, if you have any prayer requests that you find some new believers, and you give your prayer request to them, or maybe that's a good reason to be evangelistic and get some new sheep into the fold. And so, um, but Yah is constantly trying to grow us. So even new believers won't get their prayers answered immediately at some point. Even with you, many times, as he does with me, um, Yah will change it up so that what we used to do, what used to work, no longer works, because it's not about a method. It's more about having a relationship with him, and he wants to grow you. In 1 Corinthians 13, verse 11, the Bible says, when I was a child, I spoke as a child. I thought as a child. I reasoned as a child. But when I became a man, I did away with childish matters. In Hebrews 5, verses 11, they're starting to talk about, Yeshua being the priest and all that type of stuff. And it says, concerning Yeshua, concerning whom we have much to say and hard to explain, since you have become dull of hearing. Verse 12, for indeed, although by this time you ought to be teachers, you need someone to teach you again the first elements of the words of Elohim, of God. And you have become such as need milk and not solid food. Hebrews 5, verse 13. For everyone partaking of milk is inexperienced in the word of righteousness, for he is a babe. But solid food is for the mature, whose senses have been trained by practice to discern both good and evil. That's how we build spiritual muscles. Yah has called us to take dominion over all the earth. That's Genesis 1, verse 26, which I believe means the unclean spirits that are in the world as well. In the same way, here's something to consider. In the same way, as you would expect your children to grow up, your 1-year-old, your 3-year-old, your 5-year-old, 8-year-old, etc., Yah expects for us to grow up as well, enforcing his will and word in our lives over the enemy. As it states in Genesis 4:7, he told Cain, you need to rule over sin. You need to master it. We have to do the same. We are called to mature, go from glory to glory, as the Bible says. Now, don't worry. That doesn't mean that everybody has to confront the unclean spirits directly and regularly as I do, but he has a job for you to do that he has created you to do, specifically, especially for you. And it may not be what your soul thinks. It may not be totally of comfort and pleasure, gratifying your flesh to the fullest. It may not be you just cheering someone on, just go ahead, hit him again, and blah, 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 and you go do the hard stuff, and I'll sit here and eat bonbons and sit on the cloud and I'll play the liar. No, it's going to push you to your limits or however he made you. It'll be in a way that will be unique to your design. It will be challenging. Maybe you're called to, love hurting people. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to deal with demons and unclean spirits. And so maybe he's called you to be an evangelist or something like that. I don't know. But that's really not what I'm here to talk about in this segment. What I started with is we have to get skilled in using our sword of the Spirit, per Ephesians 6, verse 17, and Hebrews 4, verse 12. And notice the Bible doesn't say the sword of the soul, because we can declare and decree and claim the blood of Yeshua all we want. But if that's not how heaven is moving in the Spirit, if that's not how Yeshua is moving in that moment, then you may not get the biggest benefit of doing that. Galatians 5, verse 16, starting there, says, "And I say, walk in the Spirit, and you shall not accomplish the lust of the flesh. For the flesh lusts against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh. And these are opposed to each other, so that you do not do what you desire to do. But if you are led by the Spirit, you are not under Torah," meaning you do not get your authority from Torah. You're not under Torah. You're under Yeshua, under Jesus. You get your authority from Jesus. And in Luke 22, verse 42, the Bible states, as Yeshua stated in the garden, saying, "Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done." Many times, me included, we want our will done. For example, the immediate removal of negative circumstances or physical healing. But he may not want to deal with that right away, as maybe there's a bigger character issue that has to be dealt with, for example. Maybe there's a bigger lesson to be learned. Okay, I'm getting off the subject again. Let me reel myself back in. What verse to use when? So we see in the Bible that the enemy, Satan and his minions, we have an enemy. And we see that in Genesis 3 with Adam and Eve, as well as in Matthew 4 when Satan tempted the living word himself, Yeshua. Guess what? Satan actually used the word of Yah, of God himself, but out of context and out of timing, not in accordance with Yah's will. He perverted it too. But he did use his actual words a lot of times. Do you think Satan, perhaps, could get you to hold on to the traditions of men, perhaps claiming a verse over and over again, knowing very well that it's not going to do anything? And I know this is challenging for people as they believe in Yeshua and they love him. But sometimes they get stuck in limiting Yah and limiting God and thinking he can only work in particular ways, in the ways they believe, of course. Standing on some particular verses. Now, is there a time to do that? Yes, actually, there is a time to do that. But sometimes there's not, because that's also not, when you do that, you're also may not be growing in his word. Everything is about balance and discernment. Again, it's doing his will, how Yeshua is moving in that moment. Maybe it is standing on that word in this part of your life, but in this other part of your life, maybe you need to step out and do something different. The Bible is filled with stories and principles that we have to use to apply to our lives, as well as to the enemy when we're in sessions. And it would be wise to let Yah out of the box to allow him to move as he wants. That's the faith that we need. Now, of course, everything has to be tested. I'm not saying just everything and anything goes. I'm not saying that. The Bible is much deeper than most of us realize, as there is so much wisdom there that we've barely tapped into, to be quite honest. I'm just saying that we need to develop our relationship with the Godhead to figure out his will and direction for our circumstances and life. We can't be limited by our earthly soul, because this is spiritual warfare, which is more effective when we are led by our human spirit when partnering with the Godhead. Yah, God, has so much more for you, for me, for us to discover. So many different facets of his wisdom. But unfortunately, even for myself, I had to learn these truths, many of them, because of the pain and because of spiritual oppression. Not all of them, but many of them. But there are so many generational blessings and treasures and, our destiny, birthrights to be claimed. But we do have to overcome the evil, which can also be a tool to learn who we are and what we can do, if you so let it, if you care to go that deep. I do see a lot of people that go through sanctification, deliverance, and I sometimes wonder how much they do learn from the process. So here's a thought. What verse do you need in this moment? And how do you apply that? But here's a question. What verse do you need in this moment, and how do you apply that? I suggest that you ask them, what do I need to know? What do I need to do? As a pastor friend of mine kind of sums it up with, makes sense to me. But I pray this helps. Shalom. This is Noe with Walk with Yah, and I pray that blesses you.